So I was asked to speak about the coup in relation to civil society and what it means for the future of civil society. So I would like to say a few words about that. First of all, let me just say that when the coup, when the attempted coup took place, I think it was at night in Turkey, and we were sleeping at that time. I was in Singapore at that time. So when we woke up in the morning, there was already news about the coup, and in fact, there was already news that it was not successful. And my initial reaction when I heard the news was that, well, democracy and civil society did not succeed, as had been the case in the past. So civil society is that area where the interests of various groups in society, various classes, can be expressed and can be asserted. The difference between the Muslim world and Europe and the West is that in the West, civil society emerged at a time when capitalism was developing. The capitalist class, the so-called bourgeoisie, could express its interests. That basis of civil society does not exist in the Muslim world, because in the Muslim world, by and large, we do not have this strong independent bourgeoisie, strong independent capital owning class. In most of the Muslim world, it is the state that is dominant. Malaysia, Indonesia, Iran and Turkey have different experiences, but are all experimenting in a serious manner with democracy. There was no fight for independence. There was no revolution. Basically, there was a process of decolonization in which the Malaysian elite took over British institutions of parliamentary democracy. In the case of Indonesia, which started out as an authoritarian regime, in 1998, the Indonesians overthrew the Suharto regime, partly as a result of activities within civil society, because civil society had been growing. There was populist demand for the overthrow of Suharto. And ever since then, in fact, it's a remarkable case of democratization, Indonesia, maybe the most remarkable case in the Muslim world. Iran, of course, has been experimenting with democracy, having years and years of political contestation and checks and balances in the system. The system is obviously abused, but there has been a development in the political culture of Iranians in terms of acculturation to a system of contestation, of political contestation. Is to what extent the coup in Turkey is an expression of the liveliness and efficacy, the effectiveness of civil society. In other words, what is the extent to which it is the failure of the coup is an expression, an indication of the power of the state, as opposed to it being a reflection of the power of civil society. Now, obviously, we can't answer the question today. This is something that we can perhaps understand better in the future. Will we see civil society developing? There's a section here on page 24, page 25, but I'll just read a couple of lines. Just as Khomeini returned to Iran from Paris and became a leader of Iran by exploiting and abusing the religious beliefs of the Iranian people, so too the leader of FETÖ, Fethullah Gülen, planned to return to Turkey after the July 15 coup. Now, you know, this analogy is extremely problematic. You can't compare the revolution of 1979 with this coup. This term, FETÖ, is very problematic. I'm not denying, various aspects of the narrative, of the official narrative in Turkey. But again, when it comes to the credibility of the narrative, you see that there is no such thing as FETÖ. And you would appreciate the problem with the term when you draw the analogy with Al-Qaeda. When news about Al-Qaeda came into existence, and especially after 9/11, Muslims were going around saying that there's no Al-Qaeda. This is a creation of the West. They are creating a fictitious entity and blaming all these events on the Muslims. But fortunately, later, Al-Qaeda itself admitted to its existence. I mean, they claimed their own existence, and the term Al-Qaeda is their own term. It is not a term given by other people. Gulen movement is a movement, it's not an organization. This is the fact. Now, this doesn't detract from and the question of what they did, if they did, when they did, who was involved is another matter. But it is a vast network of various organizations, schools, businesses, and so on and so forth. We're talking about a tightly knit group, which is relatively homogeneous in terms of their ideas and their views and their activities. But on the other, in the other case, you are talking about a loose group network of various organizations, and the left hand and the right hand are not necessarily in sync. It's very important. States, governments that are too powerful. In Malaysia itself, we've been talking a lot about the kleptocratic state. I don't know if you're all familiar with the term kleptocracy. Kleptocracy, you know the term kleptomania, kleptomaniacs. Kleptocracies are states basically ruled by thieves. States in which governments preoccupy themselves with the accumulation of capital through corrupt means. There's little transparency. Governments are involved in business on a large scale. Corruption is a major means of capital accumulation. In other words, accumulation of capital through illegal means. These are called kleptocracies. There is research to show that countries which are more democratic and have a more lively civil society are better able to deal with corruption. There is in fact an inverse relationship between the degree of development of civil society and corruption. So while we are dealing with security issues like security, terrorism, political instability, we also need to be aware of the whole problem of corruption, of states that are too powerful and obtain funds illegally in a non-transparent manner, and the way that affects the very security of the state. Thank you very much.